So what are encumbrances? That's the next thing we need to tackle here. An encumbrance is anything that would render a property unmarketable. Well, so what does that mean? If a property is unmarketable, it just means you can't convey it. It means you can't sell it. You cannot give it away. You cannot transfer ownership from one person to someone else. That's what unmarketable means. Now, there are many different types and examples of encumbrances, quite a few of them, and we're going to be going through what some of those examples would be. But we're going to start out with a lien. Well, what are liens? Obviously these are legal documents that are filed at the courthouse, typically meaning you owe money. If you owe a creditor money, then they oftentimes will file a lien of some sort, and that lien is considered an encumbrance, meaning until it is paid off and the lien is removed from the record, then the property is unmarketable. You cannot sell it or convey it to someone else. Now, there's two main types of liens. The first type is what we call a specific lien, and then there's also what we call general liens. So there are different types of specific liens, and then there are different types of general liens. And we're going to talk about each one, but we're going to start with specific liens. Now, the reason these are called specific, it's a lien that only attaches itself to one piece or parcel of property. In other words, that whatever the lien, a specific lien would be, it would not affect everything you own, just one particular piece of property. Okay, that's why it's specific and not it doesn't include everything you own. So let's look at some examples, and there are several examples of specific liens. And the first one we look at is this mortgage lien, which you're going to obviously see a lot of in the practice of real estate. But obviously when someone buys a house, most people have to borrow money from the bank to buy a house. Well, when you borrow money from the bank, the lender's going to file a mortgage lien. Now that's an encumbrance. That means you cannot do anything with that property. It's unmarketable until the lien is removed. Well, how do you remove, or what would you have to do to remove a mortgage lien? You got to pay off the loan, right? So once you've paid off that loan in full, then they will file a satisfaction, and that will remove the lien from the property, and then it will be free of at least that encumbrance. Now, remember we said a mortgage lien is an example of a specific lien because it is specific to that one piece of property. Well, what if you own multiple properties? And say you quit making your payments. For whatever reason, you can't make the payments. You lose a job, whatever. And the bank has to foreclose on the property. Well, obviously, can they take that property through a foreclosure? Yes, they can. But can they take any other property you own? No, because a mortgage lien is a specific lien. It's only attached to that piece of property, not everything you own. Okay. Now I will tell you, I'm not sure if I have this in the book or not, but something you need. I would think I do, but something you need to make to remember about a mortgage lien. Mortgage liens are voluntary liens. In fact, it is the only voluntary lien. Every other lien we're going to talk about is considered involuntary. And you might think, well, what do you mean it's voluntary? Well, because you voluntarily agreed when you borrowed that money that the lender could put a lien on the property. Now, you didn't have to do that. Now, obviously, if you don't do it, they're not going to loan you the money. But still, at the end of the day, it was voluntary. Okay? These other liens we're going to talk about are not voluntary at all. They're just going to be there whether you like it or not. So let's talk about the tax lien. Now, we're talking about property taxes here. This is not income tax. Property taxes. So, obviously, if you own real estate, then you will likely have to pay property taxes unless you have some exemption. But otherwise, you're likely going to have to pay property taxes on that property. Now, you'll notice when it comes to the tax lien, it says that this will always be a first lien, regardless of whether it's recorded or not. Well, what does that mean? Why? I will tell you that's a big deal. You need to understand this. Not difficult, but you need to understand it. Most people, believe it or not, will have multiple liens against their property. Most people will have a mortgage lien because they're still making payments on the property. You're going to have a tax lien. Okay, that's going to be there. And you may find that a lot of people will have multiple mortgage liens. They could have 2 or 3 different mortgage liens on the property where maybe they took out equity lines of credit and so forth. So you could have any number of liens that are filed against the property. And maybe some other liens that we haven't even talked about yet that we're getting ready to talk about. But you could have many liens on one property. Well, why does this about the tax lien matter about it always being the first lien? Well, say the homeowner again does not make their payments. Bank's probably going to foreclose. They're going to take the property, sell it, and hopefully when they sell it, it will sell for enough to pay off all the liens that are on that are filed against that property. And if it does, then we're good. Okay, at least in that respect we are. But what if there's not enough money from the sale to pay off all the liens? Maybe we can't pay the mortgage lien and a tax lien, and maybe there's a mechanics lien, which we haven't talked about yet, but we're getting ready to. But we're short. There just wasn't enough money. Well, which one of these liens get paid off and which ones don't? Well, that's going to be based on the order of priority. Whichever lien has the highest priority will get paid first, and then right on down the line until we run out of money, and then anybody else left that didn't get paid is just going to be out of luck, or potentially out of luck. Well, how does that priority work? Or how do you determine who has first priority and second priority and right on down the line? Well, the priority is always based on the time and date the lien was recorded. Okay? So whoever recorded the lien first will have first priority and then right on down the line. The only exception to that is the tax lien. The government. The government's going to get theirs first. All right? If you didn't know it, now you do. The government's going to get theirs first. So the tax lien is always going to be the first lien, regardless of whether it was ever recorded or not. That's what they're saying here. That's all they're saying. But anyway, so a tax lien, that's another example of a specific lien. The next example is something called the mechanics lien. Again, another specific lien. But mechanics lien typically is filed by contractors. If you hired a contractor to come out and put a new roof on your house, and then you didn't pay them, then they would file a mechanics lien against the property. Now, why would they do that, and what good or benefit would it serve? Well, again, so when they file the mechanics lien, what do we know about that lien? It is considered an encumbrance. Well, what else does that mean to you if you're the property owner? You can't do anything with the property. You can't sell it. You can't give it you can't convey it in any way, shape, or form. Not as long as that lien is there. We cannot have encumbrances. So, an example that you might want to understand is, let's say a contractor put a roof on this particular house, but the homeowner has not paid for the roof yet. And say the contractor happens to be driving by, driving down the road and passes the house that they just put a roof on, and they notice there's a for sale sign in the yard now. Obviously, they're trying to sell that property. Well, what might that contractor want to go ahead and do? That could be a question they could ask you. Well, obviously, they're going to want to file a mechanic's lien, right? That will prevent them from being able to sell the property before they get paid for the work they've already done on the property. So anyway, mechanics liens are filed by contractors that have not been paid for the work or services that they've provided on that property. That's what a mechanics lien is. All right. Another example of a specific lien is something called a special assessment. Now these are kind of interesting here. You can see them in a few different ways, I guess, but two ways we're going to talk about right here. HOAs use special assessments, believe it or not. Obviously if you have a house that is subject to a mandatory homeowners association, the HOA, and you don't pay your HOA dues, the HOA could file that, what we might call a special assessment with the county, basically saying this person has not paid their regime fees or HOA fees. And then the county will actually add whatever that fee is, they'll add it to your property tax bill at the end of the year as a special assessment. So in essence, when you get your tax bill at the end of the year, obviously whatever you owe in property taxes will be there, but then you'll see where they've added to it. They've added special assessments. And there could be all kinds of special assessments. And there typically are, believe it or not. So you might want to look at those each year to see what's driving up the cost of your taxes. Because believe it or not, a lot of times what you're paying is not all just property tax. These are other assessments, special assessments they've added to your property tax. And again, one example could be HOA dues or fees or things of that nature. But where you see the special assessments most common is with the municipality you might live in. And they'll use these as a way to kind of make up budget shortfalls, where maybe they had to make repairs to a road, for example, that was not in the budget. They were not prepared or expecting to have to do this road work. Obviously they got to do it, whether it was in the budget or not. We got to repair, we got to fix the roads so people can travel, get to where they need to go. Well, what they'll do is they'll figure out how much of that road work they had to do, how much of that should be your responsibility as a property owner in this municipality, and then they will charge that or as a special assessment on your tax bill. That's what they'll do. Another common special assessment that they like to use, in fact, I'll just tell you here locally, there's a municipality that has no water. They don't have any water for their residents to be able to drink or use. So they actually the municipality has to buy the water from the city adjacent to them. So the city sells this municipality water. And obviously, when I say sell it, that means the municipality has to pay for it. Well, then they will back charge that whatever the cost for the water is back to the residents. You're going to have to pay for this water. Again, that's a very common special assessment where we are going to pay for water or some kind of utilities that would not be there otherwise. So they have to buy it from some other municipality. Okay, but anyway, y'all, that's what special assessments are. Now that's your specific liens. Again, meaning it only affects one particular piece or parcel of property. But right now we want to look at these general liens. Now these are the ones you better be careful with. If you ever have any of these general liens that we're getting ready to go over, meaning you owe money. But if it's a general lien, these liens affect everything you own, both real property and personal property. So if you owe money towards one of these general liens and you don't pay it, they can come and take everything you own. Your house, your car, your bicycle, anything. They can take it. So just be careful with these. So what kind of liens would fall under general liens? Well, first of all, your federal tax liens. That's the IRS. If you don't pay your income taxes each year, then that becomes a federal tax lien, which is a general lien. If they need to take everything you own to sell it to get their money, that's what they're going to do. Do not mess with the IRS. You pay your income taxes. Even if you don't have money to buy groceries, pay those taxes. Nobody likes it. I know I don't. I don't like paying these taxes because they're wasting my money anyway. But they can cause some major damage and problems to you. That's just unfathomable. It's just crazy how much power the IRS has. But that's a general lien, so you better be careful. Better pay them taxes. The same would be true for state tax liens. Again, we're talking about state income taxes. If you don't pay your state income taxes, the state can come and take everything you own. Again, real and personal. But here's one that I don't think very many people really understand or even aware of, and it's something called a decedent's debt lien. Contrary to popular belief, when you die, your debt does not disappear. It still has to be paid off. So what you better understand is this. Hopefully you got a will that you've decided who's going to get your house and the car, whatever you own. But here's something you better understand. Before anybody gets anything, what does everything have to go through first? Probate. You got to go to probate court. Well, one of the major functions of probate, before they issue the house to whoever and the car to whoever, before anybody gets anything, we're going to take a look and see how much debt the person had when they died. Because that debt's got to be paid off. And if you had money in a bank account somewhere and there was enough there to pay off the debt, then we're in good shape. But that debt's going to be paid off. And if there's no money somewhere to pay off the debt, then Sweetie Pie's not going to get the house. The court's going to require the house to be sold. They're going to require you to liquidate all the assets you have. Sell them. We got to create some money to be able to pay off the debt. So just understand, even though you might be in somebody's will where you're supposed to get such and such, just understand the only way you're going to get it is that when they died, they did not have any debt. Or if they did have debt, there's enough money somewhere else to pay off that debt. That's what a decedent's debt lien is all about. Because if there's no money to pay it off, then we're going to sell the stuff that you thought you were going to get. in order to pay off the debt. Okay, so debt's got to be paid off. But what if there's just not enough money to pay stuff off? We were talking about the example earlier. If the bank has to foreclose on a house because the homeowner's not making their payments. Excuse me. As long as it sells for enough to pay everything off, then at least all the creditors will be happy. But if there's not enough money, then obviously it's based on that priority of liens, if you remember. We're going to pay them off in priority. But what about those that don't get paid off? There's not enough money to pay it off. Well, then they may issue something called a judgment. Now, meaning they'd have to go to court, rather, and the courts will order a judgment. Meaning, you're not just going to be off the hook. You can't say, well, there wasn't enough money from the sale of the house to pay it off, so those of you didn't get paid, tough luck. Don't work like that. Those creditors can now take you to court and sue you for the money you still owe them, and then the courts will issue a judgment against you. And this judgment will stay there forever. Okay, or until you pay everything off. So at the end of the day, what are we looking at here? What does that mean? It means if you have a judgment against you, you'll never own anything ever again for the rest of your life. Excuse me. Until all these liens or creditors are paid off. So you will have to pay off this debt, or you'll never own anything again. So a judgment is not something you're going to want to have to deal with, I can assure you. All right. So, I'll be okay. Hold on one second. I apologize for that, but all right. So just make sure you know the difference between general liens and specific liens, and y'all make sure you know if they ask you what kind of lien is a mechanic's lien. You should know that's a specific lien. It only affects a particular parcel of property. But if it's any one of these four general liens, federal tax lien, state tax lien, decedent's debt lien, or a judgment, we know those are general liens. Those can affect everything you own. So just be aware of those. And then the last thing right here in this section, again, dealing with this priority of liens, which I already went over, but real quick, how do we determine the priority of liens? It's based on the time and date in which the lien was recorded. Whoever records the lien first will have first priority right on down the line. Now, something I will just point out to you, I think you better be careful of here. I don't know that they'll try to do this to you, but they might. Could there be a difference between when a lien may have been recorded versus when it may have been executed? And I'm telling you, it is. So executed meaning when they sign the paperwork. So if you're buying a house, when you close, you're going to sign that mortgage lien. So at the time you signed it, it's now executed. But what if it was 2 or 3 days later before it ever actually got recorded in the public record, which is not uncommon. So again, just know the priority is based on who recorded it first, not when it was necessarily executed. And I'd also remember, which lien is always going to be the first lien, regardless of whether it's recorded or not. Remember, that was the property tax lien. Okay? All right, so those are your liens that you need to understand.